Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Danielle and I like to read and review books. And since it is now officially June, we are halfway through the year now, I thought it'd be fun to do a little recap of the year and books I've read, my favorites of each month, what's on my TBR for the next half of the year. So I am filming this on June 23rd. I still have a few books that I'm going to finish in June, but currently my completed books of 2025 for the first half are 43 books, and those include 3 fanfics as well. Let's get into it. In the first month of the year, I read a whole bunch of books. I was rereading the Empyrean series for the launch of Onyx Storm. I was rereading the Halfling Saga for the launch of the last installment of the series. So I was reading a lot of books, and that one I read I'm gonna say 7 books or 8 books in that month. It was crazy. But I live in Canada. It was cold, so it was just nice to just really hone in and really get a lot of reading done because I was nice and cozy in my house. But my favorite of that month of January is kind of a controversial pick because I know a lot of mixed reviews. There are people who either loved it or hate it. I tend to see more of the hate of the book online, unfortunately. My favorite book of January was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I think a lot of people were upset with this book because some people might have thought it was a trilogy, so this was the last installment. No, this is the 3rd book of what is supposed to be a 5-book series. So it is a middle novel. You know, there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered because it is ongoing. I had a really good time reading it. I really enjoyed where the plot was going, how we got to see more of the world. Of course, it's kind of annoying. We had more questions at the end of it rather than answers, but that's kind of how series go. And if you're not really used to reading series and this was your first taste into romantasy, I understand where the frustration comes from. But I have to say this was my favorite read of January. If you have different opinions, that's fine. I'd be open to hearing them. But again, I just want to keep this a safe space. You're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. I do understand why people say this was a slower book because it was more world building, a lot politicking in general, less so much of the romance that people loved so much in the first book. But anyways, this was my favorite book of January. So moving on to February now, I think I read again 6 or 7 books. Some fun things I started in February is I started reading the Vampire Academy series. It's my first time reading it. A lot of people suggest it to me, especially because it gives same Twilight-esque vibes. Twilight was a very pinnacle book in my teenage years as a reader. So it was fun. I think I read the first 2 books and started the 3rd book in that. I read Deep End. That really got me into the Ali Hazelwood mood and becoming a very big fan of Ali Hazelwood because of that. I got to read a few arcs, so that was great. And I started Mistborn Era 2, so The Alloy of Law, I read in that month. My favorite book in February was actually An Honored Vow, which is the last book of the Halfling Saga series that I mentioned earlier. So I started rereading the quartet in January just to get ramped up for this one. And I actually hadn't read the 3rd one yet. So I just wanted to do a recap of it because it had been a while since I read it. But anyways, this was a fantastic end to this series. We wrapped things up in a very nice, concise way. There was so much character building and character arcs that were phenomenal throughout this entire series. And I loved how it wasn't rushed jumping into certain situations. They really thought things through. And also just the romance of it all. Obviously, this is a YA romantasy. I would say the romance is more subplot in it, especially leading into this book. It was a driver in it, and just not everything at the end. Everyone was happy. They lived happily ever after. They didn't suffer any mental relapses or any mental breakdowns post-war and conflict. They did explore self-healing, therapy, and just really going through what the real repercussions are when you survive a war and a war-like situation. I really enjoyed this a lot. It was amazing, and for fans of Throne of Glass but want it to be more adult, this is always what I recommend. Also, if you're not really ready to commit to an 8-book series, this is fantastic. It's just 4 books. All of it is out now. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. So moving on from that, in March, I got to read like 6-ish books, but I did start dwindling down in the amount of books I was able to finish in that month just because I was traveling. I got to go to a friend's wedding in India, and with that, I do lose a lot of reading time, but also with a really long flight, like 14 hours, I did get a decent amount when I was in the mood. I expected flying there, I would get a lot done, but it ended up, because my flight was overnight, I just slept most of it. And when I landed there, I was kind of like, oh, I wasted time that I could have read. But in hindsight, it actually helped me adapt to the time zone a little bit more better. Coming back, however, because I was jet lagged, I got a ton of reading done. I read all of Hunger Games in preparation for Sunrise on the Reaping. I was able to read Wind and Truth in its entirety, I think in about just a few days there. I read the Heartless Hunter Rebel Witch duology, which is really fun. I think Rebel Witch just came out that month, and I decided, you know what, now's the time to finally read it. It's hyped up everywhere online. I'm just ready for it. So here we go. I do have 2 favorites of that month. So Wind and Truth, just because it is the last book of the Stormlight Archive series so far of this arc. So Stormlight Archive, this is the 5th book of there. All the books that consist of it are over here: Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, and Rhythm of War. This is the final book of that. It is going to be a part 2 of the Stormlight Archive series, kind of like Mistborn Era 2, but that is not out yet. And this book was chunky. It is, I think it's over 1,300 pages. Yes, it's over 1,300 pages. So I read this while on my trip to India. I did not bring this physical book with me. I had my Kobo with me. I had my clicker. I was just click, 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 tapping through it. And I think that's a better way to get through of Brandon Sanderson's chunkier novels. It's really intimidating carrying all of these books with you and just going through it. I understand it's not for everyone and it is intimidating. However, I do believe reading on an e-reader or audiobook is a great way to get through it. The stories are phenomenal. The plot really thickens, and although it's really chunky, I do believe they needed every page of this book to get it done and wrapped up and beautifully finished. All of that to say, I don't know if it's my favorite of the Stormlight Archives right now. It was a fantastic end to this arc of the story, and also tying in with the rest of the Cosmere universe. I am very excited to see what the future holds for this, and, you know, for the overall Cosmere, and to see if the characters, how they progress afterwards. So for Mistborn Era 1 to Era 2, there was quite a bit of a jump. I think it was like 300 years or something. The characters that you actually got to know and love in Mistborn Era 1, at least where I am right now, so please don't say any spoilers, are not there. So of course you get to see the descendants and how they became legend and became heroes essentially. It's really cool to see. However, I am intrigued to see what the second era of the Stormlight Archive will entail and how it will kind of wrap into the rest of his series that are interconnected via the Cosmere. My second favorite book of March is Sunrise on the Reaping. Kind of no surprise there. I'm a massive, massive fan of the Hunger Games series. I've read Hunger Games multiple times, and again in preparation for this book. And I really suggest rereading the trilogy either before or after you finish this book. The impact of it will be a lot more substantial and it will hit home a lot more, just because you get to see back and forth between Katniss's story and Hamish's story, which this book is about. And I really loved the stories, were amazing. I really just couldn't get enough of it. Hamish was one of my favorite characters in the Hunger Games because I thought he was so complex. There's a lot more to his story than we could have known that was written in there, and it was really great to see this side of it. I will say it did make me cry a lot, of course. I finished this book right after coming home from India. I had exactly one day off before going back to work, and I finished this book, and I really needed those few hours to recover again from this. It was amazing. I loved it. I do recommend it. It does battle for one of my favorite books in the entire Hunger Games saga, I guess is what you would call it now. The OG trilogy, Songbirds and Snakes, and then there's this one. It is one of my top favorites of the whole Hunger Games universe. So that was March. Going on to April, I did get hit by a reading slump. I was just tired from traveling. I finished really big books and was kind of running on steam towards the end of March. So April, I really slowed it down. The weather was getting a little bit nicer, so I just wanted to cool it, essentially. In April, I decided to start the Red Rising trilogy, which was fantastic. I finished the first 2 books in the month of April. I read Abby Jimenez's latest book, Say You'll Remember Me, and just some more sports romances. It was kind of like my transition period, or because I was reading heavy sci-fi fantasy stuff for a while, I wanted something nice and fluffy to kind of as a counterpart so that I get both sides of my brain itched. So my favorite book of April was the second book of the Red Rising series, which is Golden Sun. So I read Red Rising and Golden Sun in this month of April, and this blew me out of the park. Red Rising took me a little bit to really get into. It took me several tries to get past the first 5 chapters. I sat down, read it, couldn't really get into it, sat down again like the next day, couldn't get comfy. I was like, screw it, let's do the audiobook, just push through the first little bit. And then I was like, whoa, here we go. Now I see where the hype comes from. I will say though, Red Rising as a standalone book wasn't my favorite. I also think because I was coming from really high fantasy novels right beforehand, it might have messed with my head a little bit, and just kind of seeing a lot of reviews online really hyped it up for me, essentially. Not to say I didn't like it, I enjoyed it for what it was. It would have been nice to get a little teaser of what was to come in the rest of the trilogy at the very least, because it was a very isolated story plot within a bigger issue of the world, what was going on. So I think it would have been nice to get a little taste of what was to come. How it ended was quite isolated in my opinion. But Golden Sun, it blew my mind. It was amazing. I really loved every second of it. Every second I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about it. That's how much it drew me in. I was so excited to jump into Mourning, but I was like, I need to take a little bit of a break because I'm going to run out of steam. And I have heard a lot of people run into that situation, especially with just the original trilogy. So I wanted to take my time and really absorb it, which is why I was kind of going back and forth with fluffy romances and heavy sci-fi fantasy novels. In May, I actually read less books. I only read 4 books. One of them was for my book club, which was First Time Caller, super fun, rom-com-esque novel. I had one Golden Summer by Carly Fortune. It was her latest novel that was just released. And then I went to her book signing in my city later that month. It was so much fun. I made a video of that earlier where you can find linked. I read Mourning, which is the 3rd book in the Red Rising trilogy. It was really nice to finish that off. And lastly, I read All Systems Red, which is the 1st book of the Murderbot series. And I read that in one sitting. It was really interesting to read. I really love sci-fi novellas. I love how they are written. They're really concise, and they are not the same narrative that you would be typically used to, especially in high fantasy and just in general series, how series are written. Sci-fi novellas are written in a very unique way, I feel. They're more written as a internal dialogue versus plot driven or action driven, and I really loved how that one was written. I don't know yet if I want to watch the series because I do know it is out, at least a few episodes. If you've watched it, let me know what you think, if it's worth watching, or should I just continue on with reading? I'm not sure. You guys let me know. My favorite book that I read was Mourning. This book absolutely made this series for me. Now I think of the Red Rising trilogy as almost, if not a 5-star series for me. The trilogy in itself. I haven't started the second half yet. I do know I need to get to them. I am taking a break, however, because I was just so deep into the sci-fi, high fantasy series in the first half of the month. And I did see a lot of people recommend to me that I take a break before jumping into the next book, which is called Iron Gold. I was at the bookstore this weekend and I did read the synopsis, like first chapter or so of Iron Gold, and it actually made me really excited to read it because I haven't been reading anything in the sci-fi, or at least the Red Rising series, in a while. So I think I will be starting that soon. I did order the special editions from Lit Escalates, so I'm waiting for that to come in before I start writing, just because I don't want multiple copies, unfortunately. But I might cave and just borrow it from the library because it's just making me so excited to read it. But anyways, this was a fantastic conclusion to that trilogy. It is very sci-fi heavy by the time you get to this book. So if you didn't really vibe with the first book, totally fine. I get it. I am a fine reader where I'm just like, you know what? It'll take me there. Just go with it. I don't need everything explained to me. They'll answer my questions when me as the reader is ready to get those questions answered. It was so much fun. The plot twists were twisting. I was so certain about certain things that ended up not being true. If you are part of my Fable club for Red Rising, you'll see all my comments in there basically per chapter. It was so much fun. If you are interested in reading Red Rising and kind of want someone to go along with it, if you feel free to join my Fable club. I will link it in my caption down below. It'd be great for you to join, and I will continue on with the series in that book club when I get the next few books in my mail. I didn't really read a lot in May, but it did set me up for a fantastic June. I had such a great reading month. I read the next book in the Murderbot series, so Artificial Condition. That was really interesting to see how the plot was developing. I read the arc for Rose in Chains, which was really fun. Another arc that I read previously in March, which is the Game Point, which is a tennis romance novel. That was super fun. But my absolute favorite reads of June were, and it's going to be a few because it is a series, it was the Shades of Magic trilogy. So I had started this series, this trilogy, because I went to the V.E. Schwab event in Toronto. And I had only read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue before that point, and I wanted to read a few more before I went to there. So that was for the launch of her latest book, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. And this series completely blew me out of the park. Each book was at least a 4.5 star. And the entire series as a whole, I would rate a 6 star. I'm obsessed with these books. I read the first book in 3 hours because I was on the train to Toronto for a work thing. And the next book I read coming back from Toronto on the train, finished it in that ride within 5 hours. The third book took me a little bit longer because I just honestly didn't want it to end. These were absolutely incredible. How it was written, the characters were so fun, and it was so unique. I could not recommend this enough to people. And what really got me to read it was sister had told me about this series a little bit ago. I had bought the trilogy and it kind of just sat sitting on my shelf for a while. And then I was mentioned to a friend that I'm going to this event for VE Schwab, and she's a big fan of it as well. She recommended reading this trilogy also. And just kind of online, I saw it kind of picking up more momentum. Just, I guess I was searching it more, I was talking about it, and the algorithm on Instagram just started showing me more about it. So I finally did, in preparation for the event, because obviously authors will talk about their previous books more, and I'm so happy I did. So I have the paperback edition. I bought the collector edition, obviously, because I was so obsessed with it. And so while I was at the event for VE Schwab, they were giving, or you could buy signed copies of it as well. And I know this is a lot, but that's how much I love these books. Like, that's how much it really captured me as a reader, and it was incredible. So each one of these are individually signed. They are just so fantastic. The magic system was so unique. Plot was really incredible. How it was written was so beautiful and very artistic. The event VE Schwab was so cool. It made me fall in love with that author and that writing style, and I do plan on reading majority of her backlist. I do have a few more of her books that she signed as well. I do actually want to reread Invisible Life of Addie LaRue as well. I had first read that book when it first came out a few years ago, and that was more because it was really popular online. I just got back into reading. It was like peak COVID time. I believe it was then. I did enjoy that novel. I don't think it was my favorite at the time, but after going to her author talk and reading her other books, it made me want to read it again and read it in a different light, essentially. But these were my favorite novels of June. With all of that to say, I did also read some fanfics. So I read The Right and Wrong duology. With it accompanied The Auction, which is actually turning into a traditionally published book, which is now Rose in Chains, which is why I was so excited to get it and read it in the month of June. So that was really fun. So those are kind of honorable mentions. Some other books that I really enjoyed was Inadequate Air, which is the third book in the Bridge Kingdom series, and that follows Zara and Karis in there. I am going to start the next book of their duology, which is Endless War. I did start it a little bit ago on audio, but I think I want to sit down and read it this time. So I will be starting that this summer. I also did a video summer TBR list, and I don't think I've posted that yet. So that one will be coming soon for what I have on my TBR. Some things on there that I am excited to start reading is there's a series called The Echoes Saga by Philip Quintrell that I am excited to start this summer. In the summertime, I really get a lot of heavier reading done just because it's so nice out, and I just like to sit by the pool or at the park and just read. So I bought that series for my husband last year and he really enjoyed it. I also just got him the novella and he binged it in just a few days, and he's not that quick of a reader. He was just so enthralled by it and loved it. So it makes me want to bump it up my list. Other bigger series that I want to tackle on this year is right here is the Wheel of Time. I actually do want to get started on that. I've had it on my shelf for a little bit, and it's time I start cracking down on that 15-book series. So wish me luck on that. If you have any recommendations for standalone books, that would be great, especially fantasy standalones, because this one's 15 books. This other series, the Echo Saga, is 9 books, plus a bunch of other series that are intertwined with there. So your girl needs some suggestions. Anyways, these were some of my highlights of the first half of 2025. If any of these books were on your list, let me know. It would be so fun to compare what you liked. If a book that you loved that I mentioned but didn't say was my favorite, also comment down below. I'd love to hear what were your favorites in 2025. And I can't wait to see what the second half has to bring. Whiskey, do you have any thoughts about the current political and economic situation going on?